whatever you want to do, and
All
Steve,
right.
and kind of get things started, just go ahead.
I will. I'll try and project so that you can hear me okay. If you can't hear me, just say so. Because I certainly want to share a few thoughts with you. The first thing I'd like to say has to do with some news that came out last night, 30 minutes before the one and only televised debate that we've had so far, and that we might actually have in this race at all. It came out that the DA of Shawnee County is issuing charges, 3 felony charges and 1 misdemeanor. They're related to an inadvertent mistake that I made. The mistake that I made was I put my mailing address instead of my physical address on some documents. And apparently that's led to 3 felonies and a misdemeanor. Well, they were voting paperwork, the nature of it, and it was a year ago, and my staff and I I'm gonna try and wrap this thing up, but the charges were filed suspiciously right before the debate, the day before voting started, and this is 10 months old. So either that's the biggest coincidence in law and order, or there's somebody's trying to impact the election, which we see that happen. We see that investigations being used to influence elections all the time, unfortunately. We see it at the very top, especially at the top, of Donald Trump having to endure endless investigations as he tries to unify and make our country great. I believe enough in the judicial system to believe that I'll be found innocent, because what I did is what I described. Now, a couple of more things on that, and then we can move on. Why would I do that? Why would I put a UPS box as my home address, as my address? Well, I deployed first 14 years ago or so. Since deploying to Afghanistan, I've lived and worked in Iraq or Afghanistan conflict environments, basically war zones, for about 8 years over the course of about 14 years. When you live over there, you don't put your mailing address. I'm sorry, you don't put your physical address, because mail will stack up and then you'll get robbed. That's literally in the PowerPoint deployment slide packet. So I've lived overseas so many years that I've always simply used a box or something of the sort. It's never been my home address for that very reason. So that's why I did it. My instinctual response to what's your address is my mailing address. Why would I give you my physical address when I'm never there? And it seems to kind of make sense because I'm in Washington, D.C. so often. Also, I'd like to bring up the fact that my opponent in the primary, Jacob Turner, and the DA share a consultant. They also share high-dollar donors. So there certainly is the perception of a possible collusive type relationship. I don't know. I hope not. My court date has been set in December. Sorry, turn that off. My court date has been set in December, which means it's way after both elections. So I need to win my elections with this hanging around my neck. I think whoever put thought into this kept that in mind as well. But that's the bad news. The good news is as follows. Well, the good news if you are a supporter. We don't believe that this is going to change the results of the election. We've done a number of polls. We're always at least 20 points ahead, up to 26 points ahead. That is a commanding lead by any measure. These are reputable polls. I wouldn't waste money on a half-baked polling outfit. These are DC reputable polling companies that have companies which has done each of them. It's like auditors. I have no control. They are professional. They do polls all throughout the country, and a 26-point lead is a very commanding lead. Also, money wins races, unfortunately, because it's how you deliver the message to the folks, and that's why money matters so much. We have more money than our opponent. We've outraised our opponent every quarter since we've been in the race. We're on television, a 4-to-1 ratio in the Topeka media market and the Southeast Kansas media market. The polling data that we've got has always included this UPS situation. We'll do a poll next week because it hasn't included the charges because those are new, but it's always included the root cause of the charges. And so that's baked into the cake, so to speak. And so that we believe with a great deal of confidence, I'd say cautious optimism that we're going to win in 20 days. To close a 20-point gap in 20 days with less money and a very suspicious allegation. Most in electoral politics, most people who think about this stuff a lot would agree that we've reason to be cautiously optimistic. But my crew and I, we work as if we're 20 points down. We won't be outworked. Strolling through my newsletters or my social media, you'll see I'm back in the district, and I have been back in the district every possible chance over the last 2 years. Having traveled well over 10,000 miles throughout the district and having traveled over 100,000 air miles, mainly to DC and home and back, 4 times around the globe. We've worked incredibly hard. There's been a thesis and a focus to our work, and that's been rural revitalization. It's taken the shape of passing and introducing legislation that focuses on rural communities. Specifically, I've backed rural broadband, trying to make sure everyone has access to high-speed internet that not only provides health and well-being and welfare. Now we see it being an educational necessity for kids who are learning at home because of COVID. Health and healthcare with the increase of telemedicine. Productivity, as oftentimes heavy equipment now relies on the internet. Also, I've introduced a bill to bring more doctors into rural communities. I would love the thought of raising my family in a smaller community than Topeka, but my wife and I are a little concerned about healthcare. We know that physicians have a tendency, a 60% tendency, to practice medicine where they did their residency. And so I introduced a bill that gives a financial incentive for them to do their residency in small communities. It's taking advantage of a natural tendency and gets healthcare where it's needed in the blackout areas. Also, I have been pushing heavily to make sure we work generally towards an infrastructure package, roads, bridges, that needs attention. Right now what's hot is police reform. Right now what's hot is getting to the bottom of these crews who are ripping up down statues, trying to erase our past, trying to deface American heroes who have helped the American success story. We've got a major political party that seems pretty ambivalent against these lawless mobs who pull down statues of Abraham Lincoln, Ulysses S. Grant, Frederick Douglass, I apologize. Just the other day I saw a story where they were pulling down a statue of Christopher Columbus in Ohio. Columbus, Ohio. So it's frustrating to see. I'm a patriot. I always have been. And we need to push back on this, and President Trump has it right. So the story of this election is socialism is rising. Donald Trump came down and pulled an elevator and said that he, as a billionaire who'd been twice divorced, was going to run on a populist Republican conservative platform. We all had reason to maybe doubt that a little, at least momentarily. But what has occurred has been nothing short of astonishing. He's emerged, in my mind, as being one of the greatest presidents in modern history. He created the Trump economy through low taxes, low regulation, record low unemployment for almost every demographic. Despite being twice divorced, he became the most pro-life president in modern times. He's building that wall, in my opinion. We always should have had one. We'll have 400 miles of it by election time. And he's being tough on our opponents, on our adversaries. North Korea, China, Russia, Iran, radical Islamic terror. He kills terrorists instead of giving their states that sponsor them pallets of cash. As a guy who focuses so much on national security, as a guy who's buried a lot of friends because of our efforts to secure our nation and to make the world a safer place. I love his foreign policy. I've commentated on his foreign policy. The list goes on, but the last thing I think I'll say about Donald Trump is how impressed I've been on how he has appointed originalist, textualist judges to the bench to the tune of 200 all over the country, and 2, of course, to the Supreme Court. So before I open it up to questions, I'll say just a little about me. You guys track a lot of candidates, and although many of us have met and chatted several times, I'll simply add a bit of bio. I'm 6th generation Kansan. I was born on a military base in Texas. My first memories were of Washington, D.C. at age 5, the monuments, the memorials, Dad in his uniform. I'm K through 12, Topeka Public School. I joined the Army after high school. I've spent 8 years in war zones, both as a qualified airborne ranger and a defense contractor. After a serious injury, I had to look elsewhere to contribute. When I turned, I thought, where can I go? I want to go back to my country, America, but where can I go that's similar to war? I thought, well, politics. So I ran in 2018 and was elected, and for the past 2 years, I've done absolutely everything I can, every single day, to advance our ideals, our values, to protect our Constitution, our President, and our country. And it has truly been an honor. So, that's me. What are your questions? Or comments? Sure.
No, I really appreciate sitting here and listening to you tell me about what our president has done, and the fact that we do have a good president. And I think that I'm preaching to the choir here. I pretty much agree with that. I also, on your webpage, and I follow a lot of the things that you've been doing. And I noted that you have, you seem to really support the military. And I appreciate that. I know we got a World War II veterans over here.
I ain't that old.
Oh, you're not that old? Okay, Korea?
85.
Korea? Okay. But anyhow, there's several veterans here. And that's appreciated very much. I guess my question to you is you touched on the burning and the looting and the rioting that's going on in our country. And I just don't feel that I've heard a lot out of you as to where you stand. In other words, speaking out, not just this is the way I feel. I feel as our representative that we need to hear from you. In other words, I'm opposed to pushing over statutes, and I'm opposed to the burning, and I'm opposed to, and I have personally maybe some of these people have, but I haven't heard that much coming from you as a representative.
Sure. Sure.
That's a concern of mine, because I think that the one thing that we don't need to do in this country is be quiet.
Yeah, I agree.
We gotta speak out. If we don't speak out, we're gonna be done.
All right. I would direct you to a speech I gave on the floor as Chaz Cha. The defacing was occurring, and I don't know if you're going to be able to hear this.
Let me ask you first, how many people were at that, where you spoke?
It was televised on C-SPAN. So it was brought, and a link to it's on our newsletter, a link to it's on our social media page. And so I'd encourage you, if you, maybe you are enrolled with the newsletter, maybe you are on Facebook and see the social media, but the purpose of this speech, if we could hear it, and be happy to email it or text it to you, the purpose of this speech is to critique Antifa, the rioting, the looting, the statue tumbling, the personnel in Black Lives Matter who have joined in this lawlessness, and so I've spoken out on C-SPAN because of it.
I may have missed it. I'm on, like I said, I'm on your webpage, and I get your information that you put out on there. In fact, I sent you a little note stating my concern with that, and that I'm just not hearing anything.
Sure, well, sure, but as you can clearly see, the biggest platform that I have regularly and reliably is C-SPAN, and I leverage that platform, the biggest that I have, as well as social media. Not enough, I don't believe enough have spoken out. I've been encouraging my peers to do so as well. They're completely lawless and should be treated as the criminals they are. My last line in the speech was an ad-lib line. I made it up on the fly, and it was something to the effect of, if you want to bring about change, you should use the law, not break the law. And that quote was re-quoted in gruesome legs on social media, as I've been told. Yes, sir.
The Antifa, while we're on that subject,
Yeah.
President Trump was going to make Antifa a domestic terrorist organization so they could be tracked through FBI and everything. Has that happened?
Has it happened? I don't know if it's happened. We treat them as a terrorist organization, openly in my Republican congressional circles, but I'm not sure about the legalities of it. We can get back with you on that. It is. I mean, they exist to scare people and to break the law, and it's terrorism as I know it to be.
Okay.
I heard on TV last night that this money that the government's given to the small businesses, there's millions and millions of dollars going to the Planned Parenthood abortion clinic.
Oh, he has.
I'd have to see that story. We've worked incredibly hard to make sure that wasn't going to happen. When we went into these large stimulus recovery bills like the CARES Act, the Democrats come to the table with their liberal wish list, and then we come with what we need to be, ours are focused on the disease and the global economic meltdown, jobs, small communities, keeping alive small governments. They come in with wish lists like funding Planned Parenthood and funding the arts, which I'm not inherently opposed to funding the arts to an extent, I suppose, but that's not, that's not in the scope of the fight here. So we have to push back forth, debate, and pass something. But to the best of my knowledge, no money went to Planned Parenthood. I would have to look into that.
Fox News is reporting almost daily.
Is that right?
Millions of dollars. They're trying to get it back.
Okay, well,
Your people are trying to get it back now, and they're refusing to get it back.
on the areas
That's the
of,
story of Fox.
I'm happy to look into that and respond to it. In the areas of pro-life, the very first piece of legislation I put my name on was to defund Planned Parenthood. I introduced the Pro-Life Act. I introduced it. It was to make illegal the fetal tissue sales. They still trade in it. They do it in a tricky way to circumvent the laws by calling certain fees like transportation fees, when actually that's like the sale of it. So I've done that. I've acted, put my name on no less than 20 pieces of legislation that are pro-life. I've got the endorsement. I'm the only candidate in this race. I'm the only candidate in this race to have the endorsement of both the National Right to Life and Kansas for Life. I have an A rating with the Susan B. Anthony group, and and I'm a member of the Value Action Team, which is a pro-life caucus in Congress. In the last 2 years, I literally have not found anything more that I could do that was in support of pro-life. I led on the floor of the Congress with all the Congress members there, 400. I led a motion to recommit on a bill regarding pro-life. So it's been a value of mine. It's thank goodness a value of the majority of my constituents. I gave what a few folks called was the best speech of the weekend at the pro-life luncheon at the Republican convention. And so I feel like I've done everything that I was possible to do, and I never will not.
I'll add this in as well. He has the most pro-life endorsements out of any candidate.
Most pro-life endorsements of any candidate.
Anybody's questioning that, they're just questioning that money
Yes.
somehow got trickled into there, and they said that it's kind of like your address. So they did something to get that money into their pocket. Now they're refusing to give it back. I don't know what
Happy to look.
they did, but
Yeah.
there was something that was done. They did something.
Happy to look into it and take whatever action I can to get that money back. Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to stand up because I think all of you are my age. We don't hear so good. Maybe some of you do, but I don't. Anyway, I'm Rosalie Myron from Summerfield, and I had a home, was assisted living, and then the numbers went down to need that. So we went into, we had a wonderful Vietnam vet that had a business degree and stuff, and he had happened to come out to get some vets in the facility when we was assisted living. Well, anyway, our numbers was going down, and he said, you know what, why don't I write a grant per diem for you? And he said, I think we can get it. There was a grant per diem came out for rural areas, and that means that's transitioning veterans out of the shelters, out of the hospitals, wherever they need, get them into a safe place, and then go into so they can start their life again. No alcohol, no drugs, and the community at first, I don't know about that, but we prayed. The churches went together, and they said, hey, we pray every week for homeless people, and now we got a chance to help them, and they're especially veterans. So anyway, the program worked out fantastic. Social workers, I'm sorry, The social workers to start with didn't even want us to get the grant. They tried everything to stop that because we have such a terrible bureaucracy. We have got to get the VA away from the bad bureaucracy that we've got. Anyway, I'll go quickly. We had 22 veterans there, and they kept coming in and surveying us, and I've been to the hellholes that they put our veterans in, where they call them per diem, and it's like shelters all over the country, and it's awful. They're 3 feet apart in one bedroom, and they can't even, they get locked down at 6 o'clock in the evening, or I'm sorry, they get locked in at 9 o'clock in the evening. They can't get out of that place until 9 or 6 o'clock the next morning. So they have, most of them were smoking. They have, you know, it's just a nightmare in these shelters where they're putting them. And because it's a bureaucracy feeding, that's what it does. It feeds them back right into the domiciliaries and all the social workers that can keep jobs. There is wonderful social workers out there. I'm not knocking everything, but it's just the bureaucracy. And when this renegade rural area got this great program, we had wonderful. We had a medical director who'd been a Vietnam nurse, and she was the head triage nurse out in California. She was our medical director. We had the business executive. He was setting up a casket company because we got $32 a day to take care of these guys. That was food and lodging and everything, transportation. And so it wasn't a lot of money. And besides that, it was a grant, and those are never safe. And so he was setting up all kinds of businesses there in our little town. It's easy to do in a rural area. And so we were doing all of this. We had a retired Army chaplain, 20 years retirement. He was our mental health person, and he had a beautiful ranch just east of Summerfield, and they could go out there every time they wanted. It was a prairie retreat ranch. They could ride horses, they could go bass fishing, they could have fried chicken dinner. His wife was great about that. So they had all this stuff, and the community treated them so elegantly. They told me they get spit on when they're setting out these shelters because they don't get respect, and they shoot. These shelters just kill their soul. Anyway, I called Jerry. This happened 10 years ago. I called Jerry Moran's office, I called everybody's office, and they just couldn't help me. The social workers sent us a letter and said that they were suspending our program because they didn't tell me why. Okay, so they came out and they brought a van. They said they were going to load up 22 guys and take them back to a shelter in St. Joe or Kansas City, wherever they were. There's a lot of other stuff. I'm trying to hurry. And they suspended the funding. We only been funded 5 months. And the grant is, they said we had a $285,000 grant to care for these guys for a year. That was 25 vets. What I didn't know, because I was a novice, you don't get a dime of that money unless the social worker says you do. And she kept the funding from us, saying something wasn't right or this or that. Anyway, okay, so these men all had private bedrooms. They had Blue Valley cable TV, could get everything they wanted. They had freedom. But no one drank, no one had drugs. Every time they come in and survey us, there was not one beer can in the place. Anyway, we just came out and said, okay, we're going to suspend your funding. And we even took this lady out to the ranch, and she never said one nice thing about it. So that left my husband and I had to try to decide whether to send the men back or keep them ourselves. We could not send them to the shelters, so we just can't. My husband wanted to kill me because it hurt us really bad financially. He's a farmer and he's worked hard all his life. Anyway, I called all these congressmen, and I called Congressman Watkins' office, and this nice young man on the other line said, I told him, I said, isn't there some way we can get some kind of a program back? Because I said, Summerfield, you know, a lot of communities are scared to death to have the vets come in if they're homeless. And he said, well, come down and I'll see what I can do. He was the only officer that would even talk to me. They might give me a phone number, which they knew nobody there ever answered. Come on. Congressman Watkins, your staff member, he said, I will do the calling for you. And so he called around to all kinds of different places. You know, we're not in a program. I mean, there's a ton of money, which makes me so sad out there. But it goes to the big cities where the shelters, where the guys can't get healed. Most of these men were from large cities that came out to Summerfield. And they said, and then when we went down to the domiciliary to pick up someone at Leavenworth, then about 20 veterans surrounded this staff member. It wasn't me, because they heard that they were coming. Stuff travels fast. They heard that the Good Shepherd village people were coming. So they surrounded this staff member of ours, and they said, tell us about your program and what it sounds like you went to heaven when you go up there. And so this girl didn't, she was just a young girl. She said, well, let's go in this little room here. And so she was trying to tell them what all that we did, and they got in a lot of trouble for that because they called it recruiting. Well, they're in a domiciliary. They're supposed to get out of the transition out into the community. Anyway, that's, but Congressman Watkins, and I don't even, they've got Marshall County split in half. I probably can't, I don't know if I can vote for it yet. I got to find that out, or whether it's Roger Bush or whatever. I have no money to give this man. But his staff said, you come down, we'll see what we can do. We've got to get more veterans into Congress because they know what freedom is. They've been there. They saw the horrors of not having freedom. And anytime we can get a veteran into our state, let's do it. And Steve's done wonderful. I've just been so enthused with him, not only because he helped me, or so far we've not got any place, but we're still working on it, praying. But anyway, he's wonderful, and we need our veterans, just like what they did. I think her name was Gabbard, the senator from Hawaii that run. She was a Democrat running on that. They didn't even let her hardly get involved. The swamp, and it's bad. They do not want anybody like a veteran that's going to come in and say, this isn't right. And that wonderful doctor, I see he just won in Texas last year, that was the VA head for Trump. They were going to try to go in and break up some of his bureaucracies. Oh no, nobody like that's going to get in there and be the head of the VA. There's lots of other stuff. I'm sorry. Thank you very much. Thank you, Steve.
Rose. That was so beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. It's a passion of mine as well. And Rose, the gentleman that you've been working with is right here. This is Ronnie. And Ronnie and my staff know to treat everyone with respect and dignity, and work for you, and do everything we can to support.
What are the plans to help? What are you guys doing to help?
We work, and first I'm on the Veteran Affairs Committee, and intentionally, and so I meet regularly with other members on how we can assure this bureaucracy of the Veterans Administration can improve and we don't backslide into even worse situations, because we've even been worse. People have waited and waited for medical service. I also happen to be a disabled veteran, and I'm a patient at the VA, making it very personal as well. So what we've introduced legislation allowing, one piece of legislation allows VA employees to be fired when they're bad. So for years they just couldn't get rid of without employees, that's what oftentimes happens with a big bureaucracy.
But what I want to know is, maybe I should ask you,
Yeah.
what do you do before?
What we also did was we made calls to the VA, SSFB, SBA, groups, just basically government organizations, seeing where the money is. That's all that we were.
And how she can maybe get
Exactly.
funded for
So
that.
she sent me a packet about 30 to 40 pages long, just about the entire operation, what's going on, kind of explaining what she
But
was
it doesn't do
responsible.
much good if you really, if you go to talk to her, you have to be advocating to get something done for her. That was
Yeah,
my
so yes,
question.
we did, of course, have to do some of the advocating for us, because, of course, we're walking up to the VA, they're going to say,
Oh, I
who are you, why do we help you?
You're
So
obviously
that's how
very
all this helps, we're able to call them.
I want to know if it was going to.
Right. And when our staff, and the majority of our casework is veterans in nature. Whether it's VA benefits, educational benefits, health, what have you, the majority of the issues. Just this past week, every week, I have meetings about the VA with VA as a member of the VA committee. My specific subcommittee has to do with healthcare, where I think it's probably needed the most oversight. And I introduced a bill last week that, and I introduced this, and I have a lot of co-sponsors. I believe this thing will get some traction. It helps fund funeral services for veterans, even if they want to get buried in private graves. That's never been the case in America. You only get financial support, caskets, and such if you're in a government. And so hopefully I can get that bill passed. I'm a small government guy, low tax, low spend, but this is something that I think that we deserve our nation's heroes.
Sorry to interrupt, but we only have time for one more question.
I got a question.
Jeez.
Okay.
Yeah.
In regards to the state of our economy,
Yeah.
and with everything continuing to be shut down, and it looks like that's going to continue for some time, I want to know what your ideas are, or what you think, and if it's even possible to restore our economy, because this is no joke.
Yeah.
This is serious business. I'm not even sure how you could do what's been done, so I'd like to know what's in the works, what people think. It can't be giving people money.
And we don't need another stimulus package.
No.
Oh, no, we do not.
Bailout, we do other states do it.
Oh, no, we can't.
Cannot keep giving people money.
Yeah, we can't pay the bills for a mismanaged New York, California liberal, so we can't just continue to print money. That's simply just you're borrowing money from China. That's just kicking the can down the road to our kids and our grandkids. And so we've been working with the Trump administration, and Larry Kudlow and Secretary of Munitions. They are interested, they are willing to look at another bill, but it's not going to be printing a bunch of money. What they're looking at are forward-thinking ideas and measures like lowering taxes when and where that could be possible to stimulate, lowering regulations and barriers to business, and then also we need to limit the liability, because if somebody, the way the legal system works, and I'm no fan of the legal system this week, somebody gets sick here, they sue the owner, and the owner doesn't have the money to defend themselves in court. The whole thing shuts down. So some people would do that, and so limiting liability of merchants and of restaurants and such. That's another thing. Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you so very much for allowing me to come and visit with you all. If we didn't get to the topic you'd like to discuss, I'm sure somebody has my number. We're happy to hear. I feel free for you to call me anytime. I mean that. I feel called. If I can't answer the call when you call, I'll call back. Always interested in hearing what you've got to say. Would love to have your support between now and August 4th, and then hopefully, God willing, in November as well. So I appreciate it. Donald Trump needs seasoned fighters. I believe an outsider makes a good leader on Capitol Hill, somebody who can drain the swamp, who's not looking for a career so much as looking at it as a deployment. And so I'd like to redeploy if it's okay with you. Thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it.